we're in the midst of a revolt, if you will, by teachers across the country, particularly in red states, that started in West Virginia, has spread to maybe almost about another half a dozen states. What do you think accounts for that happening now?
Well, I think in some ways this is a lot of educators simultaneously saying enough is enough. There's been years, decades of budget cuts to education, freezes or cuts to pay in all of these states. And so the real common denominator is the really catastrophic conditions that educators, not just teachers, but all educators, all staff are facing in these states. And West Virginia, I think we can look at it as having sparked really a wildfire that spread. And from the second that West Virginia struck and won a 5% pay increase for all teachers and public employees, then people across the country who are in similar conditions saw, oh, we can do the same thing. And that power of an example spread very quickly. And we still don't have any signs that it stopped.
And I mean, give us a sense of when we talk about West Virginia, when we talk about Oklahoma, we're talking about Arizona. You've written this piece in the Jacobin. What is the nature of the union presence in these states? I mean, because this is one of the sort of, I guess, the counterintuitive maybe elements of this story.
Right. The traditional way people think about labor is, well, you're going to have strikes and big mobilizations like these in places where the labor movement is strong. And as you sort of suggested, this has been more or less the opposite. These are right-to-work states in which the workers don't have collective bargaining. And so what that means is the dynamics of these strikes has been more explosive, more grassroots, more bottom-up, because they haven't been able to rely on institutional mechanisms through which you could collectively bargain and maybe not even have to strike. But in the absence of any rights, really, people felt this was the only way forward. The only way to make their voice heard was through a walkout like this. And in some ways, it takes us back to the history of labor and before the 1930s, when similar conditions existed in which the strike was really the prevalent form of labor action. And now across the country, with the proposed rollback in labor rights from the Supreme Court, I think we might be entering a new period in which working class people more generally, not just in these states, feel, yeah, maybe the strike is our best weapon. And that's, to my mind, one of the exciting dynamics of these movements so far.
And we should make the point now. I know in West Virginia, they had an association, right? I mean, there were representatives, but the grassroots was sort of bucking the deals that had been made by the representatives and actually held out for more. Isn't that right?
Yeah, the general dynamic has been that the unions have gone along with really what is more of a grassroots mobilization. And I don't think we should underestimate the role that the unions have played. In West Virginia, it was actually quite important in kind of giving some sort of coherence to the movement. But the pressure and the initiative came from below, including from rank-and-file union members. And the union, because the union was a little bit weaker, they didn't have the same maybe legitimacy that it might in other states to prevent it from happening or from channeling it into more traditional lobbying activities. So the unions have played an important role. And in West Virginia, I think the fact that the unions were stronger was one of the reasons why their strike was stronger. Here in Arizona and in Oklahoma, the fact that the unions are significantly even weaker than West Virginia has been an obstacle, because the organization has been almost obliged to be created completely from scratch, which wasn't exactly the same case in West Virginia. So I don't think the lesson is you don't need unions. It's very complicated. I think that unions plus this rank-and-file mobilization in all of these places has equaled militancy in a way we haven't seen before.
It's fascinating. So, in other words, what you're saying is that in West Virginia, the union was strong enough to have built a certain cohesion amongst the teachers there, but not so strong that it could go into management, and it was weak enough to go into management and say, we can't control our membership. They have their own ideas of what's going on, and that actually gave them bargaining leverage, it sounds like, in the context of what was going on in West Virginia. So let's turn our attention to Arizona, because we have a situation where in North Carolina, teachers are planning to do a one-day strike, I think in about around the 16th. Like I said, we've had Oklahoma. We've seen teachers protesting and getting rollbacks of tax cuts. West Virginia, we've seen the success there, and they are still holding out for more money for education broadly. I mean, that is one of the things that is marking all of these movements, it seems to me, and these uprisings, is that it's not just about teacher pay. It's not just about the cost of health insurance. It's about funding education more broadly. And that seems to have had the impact of getting the community on board, because, when a teacher fights for decent textbooks, they're actually advocating on behalf of parents and students.
Yeah, the message from teachers in all of these states is we're doing it for the students. We don't want to walk out, but we will, and we're walking out not from the students, but for them. And the Republicans cynically say this is just like a propaganda, this is a rhetorical device. But if you talk to any teacher here, it is very clear that for the majority of them, that is the motivating factor. Clearly, they want better pay. But what is the point of being in these schools if you don't have functioning desks, if you don't have textbooks that are up to date? And the Oklahoma strike was 100% from school funding. They had already won their pay increase. It was 100% just to get more funding for schools. Same in Arizona right now. The governor has conceded a plan that he claims will be a 20% pay raise. It's likely to be significantly less. But the main reason the strike continues, and the main point of contention, is precisely that the teachers want better funding for their students. And that's one of the reasons why, as you mentioned, the strikes are incredibly popular. And these are, quote-unquote, red states, very traditionally conservative Republican voters see that these teachers are fighting for the working class as a whole. And it's really a very inspiring moment, I think.
All right. Well, Eric, we need to take a break. When we come back, let's talk about Arizona, because it is I don't know if it's necessarily unique in having a large charter movement and a large privatization movement, but the extent in which privatization has been able to seep into public education in Arizona may, in that regard, make it unique. We got to take a break. When we come back, we will talk about those privatization efforts and the pushback that teachers are giving them right now in Arizona. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio.